Welcome, friends, to our virtual pilgrimage, tracing the message of Easter as it spread out from the place of Jesus' death and resurrection to the whole world. Before we begin, I just want to say right now, so that I don't have to keep on saying it again and again, even though I'm going to say it every 2 seconds. I don't know. You'll understand in a minute or two, but there are 1,000 reasons to say, I don't know, we don't know, scholars aren't sure, when we trace the traditions surrounding early Christianity. The truth is that our records get a lot less detailed after the resurrection, and I don't know the truth of every story in every location I'm about to share with you. But they're still worth sharing, and they're still fun places to visit. So we're going to start with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in modern-day Jerusalem. This is the location where most Christians believe that Jesus died and rose again from the dead. We've worshipped in this spot since 326 CE, when the Roman Emperor Constantine got his mother to go discover the location of Christ's tomb in Palestine. And when she and the local bishops discovered 3 crosses and a tomb located nearby a Roman temple, they had the temple torn down so they could build a church. And when they tore down the temple, they discovered a new rock-cut tomb in the basement of the temple, and conveniently there was a large stone nearby, and that's been the spot ever since. You can see there's a little church inside of a big church. If you want to be fancy about it, it's an attica and a rotunda. Little church and big church works for me, though. Here is a cross-section picture of the main holy sites. There's the Golgotha rock, where they believe that Christ was crucified. And then there's the alleged site of Christ's tomb deeper inside. The area in front of it has since been excavated. So here's another cutout so that you can see what it looks like on the inside. There's the Golgotha rock, and inside of the little church is the entrance to Christ's tomb. Here is the shrine at Golgotha rock. The rock is just beneath down there, you can see. And so that's where they believe that the cross was, that Christ was crucified. Here is the entrance to Christ's tomb. We go a little bit deeper, and we see the inside. Now, in the 19th century, there was a group of Protestant scholars who began to doubt the accuracy of the traditional location for Christ's tomb, and they started looking for other alternatives, and that journey would eventually lead them here. This place is called the Garden Tomb, and it is a second possible location for the tomb of Jesus Christ. Now, let me say again what you should hear after every sentence. I don't know, but I don't know. Here's the interior of the tomb. There's a few different reasons why we have different tombs, and it has mostly to do with arguments about the locations of various Roman walls, but I find this a little bit of fun. One reason we have the second proposed location of this tomb is because there's a different proposed location for Golgotha, the place where Jesus potentially died, what we call the place of the skull. And this hill is, we call it Skull Rock, because it looks like the face of a skull on the inside of the rock. You can see it in that little picture there that created all the fuss. It looks like a skull. I circled it just in case you couldn't see it, because I couldn't see it for a little while. But back to the Holy Sepulchre. I was amazed to see a video a couple weeks ago of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre being closed. And it was kind of an amazing video because it was the first time that the church had been closed since 1349 CE, when the population of Palestine was threatened by the Black Death. So let's go ahead and watch.
Okay, that's right.
Like everywhere in the world, Israel has changed in response to the coronavirus outbreak. They now require everyone to wear masks in public. They had a travel ban this week during the Passover holiday. No one was allowed to go more than 100 meters from their home because they didn't want families to visit each other and spread the virus over the holiday. They also have a cell phone tracking system, and your phone will tell you that if you've been in contact with someone diagnosed with the virus, and gatherings throughout the country are limited to 10. But that's only the beginning of the journey. And I wanted you to see how the message spread beyond Israel. And once again, I don't know. But traditionally, there are 3 different churches in the world that mark burial places of individual apostles. And these are the different places they went after the resurrection. Our Lenten journey this year was expected to take us down El Camino de Santiago. It is the pilgrim's road across Spain that leads to Santiago de Compostela, forgive my Spanish, cathedral. The cathedral is the traditional location for the tomb of St. James, who is the brother of Jesus Christ. And the name Santiago is derived from St. James. And so the route in English, and what I'm going to call it from now on, is the way of St. James. It's the way that leads to his resting place. The roughly 500-mile journey across Spain to the cathedral became one of the most important pilgrim routes in the Middle Ages. Today, the route is marked by these scallop shells, and it's hard to say exactly where the shell symbol originated. I don't know. Keep hearing those words even when it sounds like I do know. I still don't know. But it's possible that the pilgrims may have taken a shell from the ocean when they arrived at the cathedral, and then they took that shell back home with them as a symbol, I completed the way. And before we had these nice scalloped signs, the pilgrims were guided by small stone cairns. Those were piles of rocks along the way. And there are still a number of ancient cairns along the roadside, but they try to discourage these practices nowadays because if you get a couple million people moving rocks around the countryside, you'll quickly destroy everything. But some pilgrims still mark the way with little cairns. Part of our hope this Easter was to focus and to talk about the things that we carry with us on a pilgrimage that only serve to weigh us down, like one of these rocks. If you weren't carrying rocks in your backpack all the way across Spain, you'd probably want to put them down if you were carrying them. And for this Sunday, Jesus left the stone sealing his tomb behind. And you might want to think for just a minute about the useless stones, the emotional baggage, the things that you're carrying with you on your journey through life. When you pack for a journey, it's very important to plan to take all the right things with you. And we've been thinking about that this Lenten season, even though we were interrupted. But it is just as important to leave the right stuff behind. At church, we have some river rocks on top of the fountain in the church's new olive grove. And they're really not supposed to be there in the middle of that fountain. And if you'd like to remove one of those stones, if you'd like to practice putting down something that you shouldn't be carrying, feel free to grab one of those stones and take it somewhere else. Today, for perhaps the first time in history, the way of St. James is closed. I don't know of any other time that has happened. Once again, I don't know. But I believe that it was open throughout the Second World War, and it did not close on account of the Black Death in the 14th century. These are truly unprecedented times for the Camino de Santiago. Spain, of course, has been suffering mightily in the last few weeks with lockdowns similar to ours, but we're starting to believe that things are getting better. The rate of new infections has slowed, and maybe they have turned the corner like many other nations. We're going to move on to another place that has also suffered greatly, but has a rich Christian history. We're going to go to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, which would be the second resting place of an apostle. It is believed that St. Peter lies at St. Peter's Basilica. Surprise that. But maybe you've seen St. Peter's before, so I'm going to deviate from my theme for just a little bit, and we are going to swing through Milan. This that you're looking at, this is Milan Cathedral. Construction on this cathedral began in 1386, and the facade was finally finished in 1965. 1965. They finished construction only 50 years ago. It took them 580 years to build. But one thing that I love is that before they built this big cathedral here, there was a smaller church there was a little church. They got rid of it, unfortunately, instead of keeping it. But the little church was dedicated to Saint Thecla. And Saint Thecla has got to be the most colorful saint in all of Christian tradition. Saint Thecla, after she met Paul for the first time, she took a vow of chastity. And then some male nobleman accosted her and attacked her, and so she beat the snot out of him. And for beating the snot out of him, she was sentenced to be eaten by the wild beasts in the Colosseum. But when she entered the Colosseum, all of the female lions rose up to protect her from the male animals. And then she, in the middle of the Colosseum, baptized herself as an apostle in front of the crowds in this pool full of rabid sea lions. Afterward, she joined up with St. Paul, and she traveled the world to preach the gospel. Kind of makes you wish that this cathedral was still dedicated to Thecla. She was awesome. Thecla went on to become the patron saint of healing. And so when plague struck Italy, it was often Thecla that they asked to pray to on their behalf. And so this painting is Thecla praying over the Italian city of Este during the Italian plague about 100 miles from Milan. But back to Milan. The great Italian plague struck Milan terribly in 1630, and everyone in the city was forced to stay inside their homes, and church services were canceled. In fact, what the local bishop really loved was having this big parade where everyone would walk together through the streets of the city and they would sing their favorite hymns, and they had to stop all of their parades during the plague because of social distancing, and they had to come up with a new plan. And so the new plan was that whenever the church bell rang, everyone in the city stood in their doorway or they stood at their window and they sang their favorite hymns together. A number of people wrote about this experience. They said, "It was a sight to see when all the inhabitants of this populous city, numbering little short of 300,000 souls, united to praise God at one and the same time, sending up together a harmonious voice of supplication for deliverance from their distress. Milan might at this time have been compared to a cloister of religious serving God in their cells, an image of the heavenly Jerusalem filled with the praises of the heavenly host. And walking through Milan, one heard nothing but song, veneration of God, and supplication to the saints. It was so beautiful that one almost wished that the tribulations would last longer." The streets of Milan today are, of course, almost empty as the country recovers from another viral outbreak. But maybe you've heard reports in the news of the same type of singing as before. Now, I don't think they're singing quite as many hymns as they used to in the 17th century, but it was probably just as beautiful. The final resting place of one of the apostles of Jesus Christ is a bit further away than the other two. This is St. Thomas Cathedral Basilica in Chennai, India. Tradition says that St. Thomas spent the majority of his life after the resurrection just going east and going east and going east. And they say that for 20 years, from 52 CE to 72 CE, he preached the resurrection on the Indian subcontinent. And this might seem like an impossible story, and I don't know. What we do know is that there has been an ancient Christian community in India as far back as the 2nd century. So somebody took this message to India, even if it wasn't Thomas himself, and when the European settlers arrived, they're the ones that built this cathedral. Chennai itself is an amazing place, and it's the only place on today's pilgrimage that I've actually been to. All the rest are on the bucket list. But I want to show you a picture. This picture is from March 19th. March 19th, 2020, 4 days after our shelter-in-place order went into effect. And all the people here know about the dangers of the coronavirus. It had already appeared in India, but they gathered anyway to protest the Citizenship Amendment Act, a new law that will give legal status to many undocumented immigrants in India, but the law was written specifically to exclude Muslims. And so those people gathered in that picture are Muslims who are risking their lives in order to demand equal status as their Hindu and Christian neighbors. This picture reminds me of the simple fact that disaster makes inequality worse. The people that suffered before the outbreak are suffering twice as much now. In fact, in the United States, Black Americans have been dying at rates far higher than their percentage of the population. Everything gets worse during a crisis. And it is worth remembering when we see small inequities during normal times and we think to ourselves, well, that's not a very big deal. Well, when the day of crisis comes, it might be. When I was in Chennai, one of my favorite differences was the traffic. There were scooters literally everywhere. I kid you not, I once saw a man riding a scooter with 6 goats tied to the sides and across his lap and on the back. The man had his whole herd of goats tied to that scooter. I couldn't believe it. I have no idea how to describe it. And so this is the picture of modern Chennai that I find most enlightening. This police officer is telling this family to do exactly what police officers around here tell us. Go home. It is now mandatory for everyone in India to wear a mask at all times, and it was pretty normal today and when I was there to see a whole family of people all riding on the same scooter all at once. And so this officer is having some fun, telling some people that this virus is dangerous and they need to go home. But not everyone can stay home. And these are the people that clean the streets and the public areas of Chennai every day. And they're on the front line in India, keeping people from contracting the virus. But jobs like the ones that these people have pay so little that most of the people in this picture do not have running water in their own homes. In fact, a common complaint among people that work this job is, how am I supposed to wash my gloves? You expect me to wash my hands? How? the nation of India is currently under a 21-day lockdown. Schools are closed. And so parents hoping to educate their children have turned to YouTube for help, as I have turned to YouTube to host many of these videos. About half the population of India has been watching the YouTube channel Khan Academy for their educational needs. 627 million people. That's nearly double the population of the United States. 627 million people have watched an average of 4 hours and 48 minutes of Khan Academy videos every single day. 627 million people, 5 hours every day. The numbers are mind-boggling. But it might be the only education that these kids get. To end our pilgrimage, I want to take you to the only Presbyterian church in Chennai. This, of course, is St. Andrew Presbyterian Church of Chennai, India. And it might feel sometimes like we don't have much in common with people who live on the other side of the world, with people who live through crises of ages past, with the people that heard the message first from the apostles and the disciples and the missionaries that went out. But in moments like these, we are more alike than perhaps ever before in our lifetimes. And no matter where you are in this world today, you're going to find people of faith doing their best to help each other, to love each other, to support each other, to care for each other through this pandemic. And that's a big part of our Easter story. Because when the message of Easter morning went out, when it went from the tip of Spain to Chennai, India, in about a generation, it drew this whole world together. And we are united with these faraway places as never before. Thanks for traveling with us, and I hope this has been a little bit of fun. Bye.